Hello, this is Shannon with Dogwood Crochet, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet this braided Christmas stocking. So this is made with a super chunky yarn, and it works up really quickly, and this is using the Jacob's Ladder stitch that gives it kind of that braided or cabled look. And here's the back. And then it has a fur cuff and then a little stocking loop that you can hang it from your mantle with. So let's get started. So to make this stocking, you're going to need a 9mm crochet hook, and then you will need 1 skein of yarn. I'm using Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick. This is the color Starlight. And this is a super bulky number 6 yarn, and we will be using almost the entire skein of this yarn for the stocking. And then you will also need some super bulky number 6 fur yarn. This is Lion Brand Go for Faux yarn, and this is the color Bear. And then you also might want to use a yarn needle for sewing in, weaving in ends later, and then also a stitch marker might be helpful as well. So to get started, we're going to make a magic circle. And then we're going to chain 2. Now we're going to place 10 double crochet into the circle. All right, one more. 10. Okay, so now we have 10 double crochet in our circle. And now we're going to pull our circle tight. So I'm going to start by pulling on this yarn tail. It's going to pull one of these. We have 2 kind of strands in the circle. It's going to pull one of them tighter. Then we're going to want to find that one and pull that one to fully close the circle. And then you can just pull on your yarn tail. And we're ready to go. All right, so we have 10 double crochet in round 1. So we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the round. And then we're going to chain 2. Now for round 2, we're just going to place 2 double crochet into each stitch of the round. So I'm going to work into this first stitch that we just slip stitched into. And we'll just place 2 double crochet into each stitch of the round. So I'm just going to continue doing this, and I will come back at the end of round 2. Okay, so I just finished my last double crochet of round 2. So now I have 20 stitches. And now we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch of this round to join. So now we should have a flat circle like this. And for round 3, we're going to chain 2. And then we're going to place 1 double crochet into the first 12 stitches. So our chain 2 doesn't count. We're going to work into that first stitch that we just slip stitched into. And we're going to double crochet into these first 12 stitches. Okay, 11 and 12. All right, so we just double crocheted into the first 12 stitches. Now we're going to chain 10. So we're starting our first Jacob's ladder. So from where we're at right now, we're just going to chain 10. All right, so I just chained 10. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find this stitch that we just came from before we chained, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of this stitch. So we're going to kind of wrap our chain around. It's going to create that loop, and we're going to take our hook and we're going to place it in the front loop of this stitch and then kind of under this piece of yarn here. So we place our hook through that, and then we yarn over and pull up a loop, and then we pull it through the chain or the loop that's on our hook. So we just created this chain loop. So that's our first chain that we will use for the Jacob's ladder stitch. So now to work the rest of the round, we're just going to double crochet into the next 8 stitches. So here you could see we double crocheted here already. So now we're just going to continue working our double crochets around until we reach the beginning. And 8. All right, so we just did our last 8. This is our slip stitch from round 2, so you don't want to work into that. So we're just going to slip stitch into the top of the first stitch from our round 3. And then chain 2. So we did not increase for round 3. We should still have 20 stitches at the end of round 3. And here you can see our stocking is starting to round. And we have our first chain ready to go. So now for round 4 and rounds 4 through 6, actually, we're just going to repeat what we did in round 3. So we're going to double crochet into these first 12 stitches, and then we're going to chain 10, slip stitch to the top of the 12th stitch, and then double crochet 8, and then slip stitch to join. So just work our double crochets And then I'll show you what to do when we get to that chain, because it can get a little bit tricky. Once you get the hang of it, it's fine, but it could be a little bit confusing at first. Okay. Now let's just go back and count our stitches just to make sure that we have 12. I might have done 11. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep. All right. So we need to do one more before we chain. So this is where the stitch marker can come in handy. If you want, once you have done your 12th stitch, if you want to place the stitch marker in this stitch right here, then that'll help you to remember that you do need to work into that stitch before you chain. So you could place the stitch marker in there, but just remember you do need to work into that. You should have 12 stitches before you chain, and the chain 2 does not count. So let's do our 12th double crochet here. And then we're going to chain 10 again. Oops. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So now we have our chain 10, and then we're going to do the same thing where we slip stitch into the top of this stitch here. So I'm just going to get my hook, place it through the front loop of that stitch, and then this other piece here, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through the loop that's on my hook. So now we have our second chain loop. Now you can just push this chain to the front and out of the way. And so if you're looking at this, you want to make sure that you're working into this loop here. That's our next stitch that we need to work into. So you could also place a stitch marker there if you wanted, just to remind yourself there shouldn't be any leftover stitches on either side of our chain loop. So we worked into this one here, and then we're going to work into this one here. So just move it to the front, and then just double crochet into this stitch here. Just like that. And then double crochet in the remaining stitches of the round. So once again, we should be doing 8 double crochet here. Alright, and then this is my slip stitch from the previous round, so we're not going to work into that. Slip stitch to the first stitch of the round, and then chain 2. So that was the end of round 4. You can see our stocking is starting to take shape. We have our 2 chain loops here so far. There will be a little bit of a gap here behind each chain, and that's totally normal. It won't show up in the finished stocking. And then we can just check our stitch count. We should have 20 at the end of each round. We're not increasing or decreasing. It should be staying the same. You should have 12 before the loop and then 8 after. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And once again, you could place a stitch marker there to remind yourself that you do need to work into that stitch. And then afterwards, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then this was our slip stitch, so that doesn't count. So we have 20 stitches, and then for rounds 5 and 6, we're just going to repeat those same steps that we just did for rounds 3 and 4. So I will continue working and then I will come back at the end of round 6. Okay, so I just finished round 6 and this is what my stocking is looking like. We have 4 of our chain loops and it's starting to take shape. So now for round 7, what we're going to do is we're basically going to do the same thing as the previous rounds 3 through 6, but we're going to make a slightly longer chain loop. So we're just going to double crochet into the first 12 stitches just like the other rounds. But then when we get to the chain loop, instead of chaining 10, we're going to chain 12. So I'm just finishing up my double crochets here. And now we're ready to do our chain. And like I said, we're just going to chain 12 instead of 10 for this round only. So round 7, chain 12. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. And then we're just going to slip stitch into the top of the stitch and then work 8 double crochets in the remaining stitches of the round. So the only difference in round 7 is we are chaining 12 instead of 10 in that chain loop. So I'm just going to continue working this and then I will come back for the next step. Okay, so I just finished round 7. Now we're going to start on the heel. So we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to single crochet in the first 12 stitches. So we're working in those 12 stitches up to that chain loop, but this time we're single crocheting instead of double crocheting. All right, so now we should have 12 single crochets. So that is the end of row 1 for our heel. So now we're going to chain 1 and turn. And then we're going to decrease. So we're going to single crochet 2 together between these first 2 stitches. So to do that, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. We'll have 2 loops on the hook and insert our hook into that second stitch and yarn over, pull up a loop. 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. So we just decreased, we went from 2 stitches to 1. And then we're going to do that decrease again in the next 2 stitches. So single crochet 2 together, we're going from 2 to 1 stitch. So we technically just worked into those first 4 stitches, but now we're down to 2 stitches. Now we're going to single crochet into the next 4 stitches. And then we should have 4 stitches left. And then we're going to single crochet 2 together between those 4 stitches. So just like we did at the beginning, we're going to do 2 decreases. So we're going to go from 4 stitches to 2 stitches. So we'll work between these first 2 stitches, single crochet 2 together, and then we have 2 stitches left, single crochet 2 together. And that's the end of row 2. So now we should have 8 stitches at the end of row 2. We started with 12 at the end of row 1, and now we've gone down to 8. Chain 1 and turn, and then we'll start on row 3. For row 3, we're going to decrease in the first 2 stitches, so single crochet 2 together. And then we're going to single crochet in the next 4 stitches. And then we do one more decrease or single crochet 2 together in the last 2 stitches. And that's the end of row 3. So now we've gone from 8 to 6 stitches. Now for row 4, chain 1 and turn. We'll single crochet 2 together in the first 2 stitches. And then we will single crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then single crochet 2 together in these last 2 stitches. So now we're down to 4 stitches at the end of row 4. Now for row 5, we're going to single crochet 2 together in all 4 stitches. So we go from 4 to 2 stitches. Okay, so we just finished our heel, and now we are going to go back to working in rounds. So this next round will be round 8, since we left off on round 7 before we did the heel. So here is our heel, and if you fold it, you can see it folds in half like this. And then this is the front of our stocking. So this round is probably just the most tricky. So we're basically changing where we're starting the beginning of each round. So we are going to be starting the beginning of each round at this point now. Before we were starting it on the back here. So we're going to chain 2. And then if your stocking is laying flat like this, you can see kind of this slanted angle of the heel here that leads into our chain loop. So we're going to place 4 double crochet along this slanted edge. And just make sure to do it at even increments if you can. Two, 3, and 4. All right. So we just placed 4 double crochet along this slanted edge of our heel. Now we're going to find this stitch right before our chain loop, and we're going to double crochet into that. So this will now be our 5th stitch. All right, so we started here with our chain 2, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is now our 5th stitch. And after our 5th stitch, we're going to chain 10. So we're making another chain loop with our chain 10. All right, and then slip stitch into the top of that stitch. And then push our loop to the front, and then double crochet into that stitch right next to it. And we're going to work into the next 8 stitches. So this should be looking familiar from our previous rounds. So if we work into the next 8 stitches, that'll take us to the slanted angle of the back of the heel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so we just did our 8 double crochet. And then here you can see this was our slip stitch, so we're not going to work into that. Now we're going to place 4 double crochet along the slanted angle of this side of the heel. Just like we did in the last, on the other side for the heel. Try to keep them at even increments. If, you know, I don't really like that gap, so I'm gonna start over. I'm gonna place it a little bit closer, maybe here. Just kind of play around with the placement of these if you're not liking some of the gaps. Also though, this is the back of the stocking, so if there is like one small little gap, it hopefully shouldn't be too noticeable. Okay, so we just finished the 4 double crochet along the slanted angle of the heel, and now you can see these are our 2 single crochets from our last row of the heel. So we're going to place a double crochet into each of those. All right. And then we're going to slip stitch into the top of our chain 2, or the first stitch from round 8, and then chain 2. So that's the end of round 7. We should have 19 stitches at the end of, round 8, I mean. That was the end of round 8. We should have 19 stitches at the end of round 8. You can see now we have our heel, and it's starting to slant a little bit. So now for round 9, we're going to double crochet into the first 5 stitches. Four, and then 5. This one right here, right next to our chain loop. Then we're going to chain 10. And then we're going to slip stitch into the top of this stitch. And then we're going to double crochet in our remaining 13 stitches of the round. So don't forget this one right next to our chain loop. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then we should have 1 stitch left. This was our slip stitch from the previous round. We're not working into that. We should have 1 stitch left. We're going to place 2 double crochet into that last stitch. So if you remember from the end of round 8, we only had 19 stitches. So this small little increase is going to get us back up to 20 stitches for the rest of the stocking. And then we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch of the round and then begin round 10. So round 10, very similar to round 9 pretty much. We're just going to double crochet into the first 5 stitches. Do our chain 10. And then slip stitch into the top of that stitch. And then we are going to double crochet into the remaining 15 stitches of the round. So we're not increasing or decreasing for round 10. We're just working into our existing 20 stitches. So we have 5 stitches before the chain loop and 15 stitches after it. Now we are at the end of round 10, slip stitch to our first stitch of the round, and then chain 2. Here's what our stocking is looking like. You can see it's really starting to take its shape. And then what we're going to do for rounds 11 through 14, we're just going to repeat what we did for round 10. So we're going to continue working 5 double crochet, do our chain 10 loop, and then 15 double crochet, and then slip stitch to join. So just repeat round 10 until the end of round 14, and then I will come back for round 15. Okay, so I just finished round 14, and here's what my stocking is looking like. So now we are ready to chain these chains to get that really pretty braided look from the Jacob's Ladder stitch. So this is the end of round 14. Before we go on to round 15, it's very important we need to chain these. So to do that, we're just going to start with these first 2. Just pull this top one through the loop of the bottom one. Just like that, just like we were chaining. So get the top loop and pull it through the middle of the bottom loop. If you want, you could also use your crochet hook for this and act like you're actually chaining them, if that helps you to kind of visualize. But that's all we're doing. We're just chaining the chains all the way to the top. And then we get our last one. And now we are done with that step. So you will have your last chain hanging out at the top here. But now we have that beautiful braided Jacob's ladder look on the front of our stocking. So now we're ready to start round 15. So we just finished chaining these chains, and now we're going to do round 15. So we're going to chain 2, and we're going to double crochet into the first 4 stitches. And 4. Okay, so we should have our 1 stitch here. This is our 5th stitch. Before we work into that, we're going to incorporate the top of this chain into this 5th stitch. So to do that, we're going to yarn over, and we're going to place our hook through the middle of this chain, and then we're also going to place it through our 5th stitch. So you might have to kind of, it's a little bit finicky, you might have to kind of wiggle your hook around to find that 5th stitch. And then yarn over and pull up a loop so that your loops are now, this loop is going through the center of this chain. So 3 loops on the hook. We just worked through this 5th stitch here, and we're incorporating our chain. And then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. All right, so we just did that double crochet, and it's just to kind of finish off this last chain to incorporate it into the rest of the work. So now we're going to do the same thing on this 6th stitch on the other side of the chain. So this one might be a little bit easier because you kind of don't have to work backwards. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook through this chain loop here, and then we're going to insert our hook into the 6th stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and I'm going to pull it, oops, let's do that again. I'm going to pull this loop around the chain, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now you can see our chain is incorporated into the double crochets. And then we just continue working our double crochets around until we've reached the beginning of the round. But there you can see we just worked this last chain loop into the tops of our 5th and 6th double crochets. And that's it. So we should still have 20 stitches at the end of round 15. All right, one more. And now we are going to slip stitch to join, and we are now done with our wool yarn. So now that was the end of round 15, and then we're going to switch to the fur yarn for round 16. Okay, so now we're ready to begin round 16 with our fur. So I just fastened off with my wool yarn, and then I'm going to secure my fur yarn into this first stitch. Then I'm going to pull up a loop and chain 2. Now we're just going to work a half double crochet into each stitch of the round. So we will have 20 stitches at the end of round 16. We're not increasing or decreasing. We're just working into all of the existing stitches with 1 half double crochet. So fur yarn can definitely be a little bit challenging to work with sometimes. I would say my best piece of advice is just to really feel for the stitches. Since you can't see them right now, this round 16 should be pretty easy since we can still see our stitches with the wool yarn. But as we get into the later rounds with the fur, it'll be really important to just feel for the stitches. I know some people use stitch markers when working with fur. You can mark every single stitch if you wanted to. That's one other option that you could try. I would also say it doesn't matter a whole lot. We're not changing our number of stitches, but as long as your fur is still starting to line up and work in a straight line with the rest of your stocking, if your stitch count varies a little bit, it's not the end of the world. So I just got to my first stitch of the round. Just going to slip stitch to join and chain 2, and then we're just going to repeat round 16. So just half double crochet into each stitch around, and once again I'm just feeling with my fingers for that next stitch. You can count as you go if that helps you keep track. Yeah, those are kind of my best tips for working with fur yarn. So we just continue this until we have our stocking cuff. So just half double crochet in each stitch around. We should have 20 stitches at the end of each round, and we'll repeat this until the end of round 20. All right, so I just finished round 20. So I'm just going to fasten off since we are working until the end of round 20. And then you can fold over your cuff and make sure that you like how it's looking. Just going to cut my yarn tail. And then we can weave in our end. You can just use your fingers for this, or you can use your hook. And so since we'll be folding this over, I want to weave it in on this part here. And just bring it down to where we joined the fur yarn to begin with. And then I'm just going to find these other 2 tails and just tie them all together to make sure that they're nice and secure. I'm going to cut each piece to be about 35 inches long. So let me just set up my measuring tape here to 35 inches. And then I'll cut that. And we want 2 of them. Just make sure that they're the same length. Doesn't have to be exactly 35, but 35 is just an estimate to help you gauge how long they should be, but this is basically how long they are. And then we're going to use both strands together. We want to leave a little bit of a long tail just to be able to secure it into the stocking. So make a slip knot, leave a little bit of a long tail. Here's the tail I'm leaving. It's maybe about 6 or 7 inches long. Then we're going to chain 8 with both strands. Four, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so now we have 8, and then we're going to slip stitch into this first chain to create a loop. It can be a little bit tricky with these double-stranded, but if you want to use a slightly bigger hook for this step, that can also help. All right, now we have our loop, and then I'm just going to fasten off. And now we have our stocking loop. Okay, so now we have our cuff folded over, and then I'll just show you how to attach this stocking loop. So we just want to place it up here, and I'm just going to get my hook and feed it through one part of the fur where I want this set of tails to go, and just pull this set of tails through. And then I'm going to go maybe 1 round down, like here, insert my hook and pull the other set of 2 tails through, just like that. And then I'm just going to tie these sets of tails together in a knot. And then we can just stuff them back to the inside of the stocking and then either weave them in or cut them off. And that's it. Now we have our finished stocking. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more crochet tutorials. And the full written pattern for this braided stocking is available on my Etsy shop. I'll link that in the description box below. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and Merry Christmas!